Goddess worship and god worship will be dominant at various phases in a planet's cycles. So we are in Dwapara Yuga, which means we're in an ascending cycle, but we're just coming out of the bottommost cycle. So we're just starting to ascend in kind of the multiple cycle system that just kind of happens over thousands and thousands of years. Usually a yuga is considered many millions of years, at least hundreds of thousands of years in length. But Paramahansa Yogananda, Samaji Yukteswar, Hir Moshe, Babaji, and Christ Krishna, that whole lineage, they actually realized that the yugas are much smaller in their length. That there are grander tendencies as far as the yugas go, but they actually kind of are smaller lengths of time. So Dwapara Yuga, for instance, instead of being hundreds of thousands of years to 1 to 2 million years, is a few thousand years. And Kali Yuga, instead of being, I think, 250,000, 300,000 years, it's actually just about 500, I believe. And you have Tetra Yuga after Dwapara Yuga, and then Sattva Yuga at the top, and then the yugas kind of also descend in reverse order as you go down the cycle. So a lot of Hindus have, decided, I'm one of these Hindus, by the way, I've decided that we kind of combine the ideas where all the yugas do have these smaller segments, but there's also bigger yugas. It's almost like, having different weeks in a month or having different days in a week, but still having those bigger segments, bigger functions of time and cycle. So yeah, I usually think of it that way. It's very humbling when you step back and think, oh wow, these yugas, and Hindus have been talking about this for thousands of years, but these yugas are in hundreds and thousands of years, and most of in the United States, for instance, most of Western culture has been instilled and produced and perpetuated at most for 3,000 years. Like it maybe started about it's about 2023 right now, so 2,023 years ago, we're right at Christ, and then maybe 5,000 to 500 to 1,000 years before that is kind of when our usual idea of society, our tendency to think in a very specific, this kind of civilization way started. But this is just, at most for about 3,000 years. Let's push it back to 10,000. Let's say 10,000 years into what our civilization is and how it works, how it functions, and our basic ideas of things, very, very much patriarchy, because we assume that patriarchy and male dominance is just a human thing, or it's a species thing. But if we look at other species, there's plenty of female dominated ones. But it's really just been a definite thing for about 3,000 years. And 3,000 years seems like a lot to us as individual human beings, but 3,000 years on the grander scope of things, we've been this evolutionary stage for over 250,000 years. Shamanism, I believe that we have, as far as actual records or archaeological records, shamanism's been around 10,000 years that we can prove, as far as unearthing things that are shamanistic. But shamanism is a combination of relationship with the planet, the environment, male and female both having equal prominence based on role, but everything being a part of a cohesive group and an intersharing of function. Society and civilization as we see it now has only been this way for a very short amount of time, and industrialization has really thrown everything off kilter. Because about industrialization 1700s, at most late 1600s, but let's say 350 years. Industrialization, we've started really polluting this planet and using of its resources at a much expedited rate compared to the 300,000 years anything we did in that amount of time before that. So, is civilization, is the way we view society, is the way we view the earth and resources, and just and let's face it, the world is almost completely capitalistic. And even when there was communist countries, like actual communist countries, they still abuse resources. So, it's not just a capitalist thing, but historical materialism and capitalistic materialism, and just viewing this earth as something to use, the resources to be expended to create more for ourselves, we don't know where that's going to lead yet. That's still a very, very new thing. And it looks like we might pollute our earth and use up our resources before we have a chance to evolve or realize higher truths or reach levels of enlightenment that are beyond this one. So we don't know if patriarchy and male-dominated society, or the way we view civilization and society, if the short amount of time we've been doing this is actually going to bring about the destruction of the human race or our governmental systems. Probably not all of that. We don't know if it's going to cause some kind of collapse at the very least, because human beings will probably survive. The earth is definitely going to survive. Life on earth will definitely survive. Even if a nuclear apocalypse happened, life on earth will survive, and the earth will survive. Human beings, if some kind of collapse happens, our standard of living will reduce, many, many, many fold. Safety and life expectancy will both reduce. But are human beings going to be gone? Probably not. But we don't know if these basic trends that we take for granted, or these basic understandings of how things work, if they're going to actually work even in the short term, even in the next 100 years, because of what we see as far as evidence goes in the environment and you can say in societies, but that's reading a lot into it. I don't think societies are showing as much of a collapse as our effect on the environment and pollution and sea levels rising, and really our obsession with feeding so much food to livestock instead of eating less meat and actually being able to have more fresh water, have more food, and pollute the environment less. But so all these things play a key role into how things are going to develop. But the overall picture is, we are in a certain phase. We're just starting to ascend again. And in hundreds of years during our descended phase is when modern civilization, societal norms formed. So the way things are is not necessarily how they will be or should be. But we'll have to see how things turn out. And me and you watching this, and me as a person saying this, we won't see how this will work out. Not because everything's going to be destroyed, but because we just, I'm 31, and I'm not going to live another, 70 something years to see how this turned out. If I do live over 70 years from now, my faculties won't all be with me, but my general point is that we won't see how everything really pans out. I think every generation decides for itself that either it's the end or there's going to be a new future very soon that's better. Because think about, what was it, 2001 or something, Space Odyssey? Anyway, the movie with Space Odyssey on it. It was like, in the 2000s, space will be this accessible and we'll have, this many people in it. It's very hopeful. At the same time, for hundreds of years, even since the Iliad, in every generation, people have been like, we're getting worse, and the world's about to end. It's two levels of doubt in humanity and hope. The doubt, it seems like it's been there, but for as long as we have recorded history, I won't say that. At least since the earliest record that I read of saying, people are getting worse. People in my day could pick up bigger rocks and they had more honor. That was all the way back to the Iliad. So, BC, people have been saying stuff like that. And then now, they're still saying it. As far as hope for the future, and that's strange because even BC for the Greeks, they had the Titanomachy, which is their apocalypse, but at the beginning when the gods defeat the Titans. But then they do have, besides their apocalypse being at the beginning, They do have the idea of, I think it was brass, copper, bronze, silver, gold age. Anyway, I'm misremembering it, but they do have the idea of circular ages. Circular, very pagan thing where circles. But the idea that things are getting worse, or that this generation is worse than the last, is very human. Or is it? Is it civilization, societal based on our standards now? I don't know. But with the Abrahamic traditions and religions, we are introduced to linear thinking, which is not cyclical like pagan. And even if some of the pagans were doomsayers. And if we have a prophet, if we have a messenger of God, son of God, or a prophet, or any religious figure where you're always measuring, and I'm not just talking globally, because the British kind of screwed everybody else over that they invaded or colonized, because with the idea of, this is when Christ was born, hold yourself relative to that. But religiously or spiritually, if you have a person that's instrumental to everything else, and you're either saying things are getting worse, or you're always going to hold yourself relative to that spiritual religious figure, then you're anchoring yourself in the past, and you are traveling in a line. And I think that is indicative of an age where we were descended, where we didn't understand things, and there's going to be people for a long time holding themselves relative to a time where we did not understand things, and we thought God was hate, God was wrath, that we screwed up so bad that God sent down his son, and then his son died for us because God's like, well, somebody's got to pay for all this crap that they did that I don't like, even though I gave them free will. that is not comprehensive or intelligent thinking about the source of everything that we see. That sounds like God is a child who's like, oh man, I do not like what y'all did. Somebody's got to pay for it. But why though? No, somebody's got to pay. No, it could be my son, either my son or everybody else. That's not an intelligent view of a creator force, a creator God. And I don't even think that's what Jesus said. I think Jesus was a yogi that was misunderstood and his words are twisted later on. But when he said, I and my Father in heaven are one, and only through me, he was talking about a state of consciousness that we all have to reach. Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness that we all have to reach. He wasn't saying I, the body. He wasn't saying only, this will be transferred into my body, into my blood, and then you're consuming me. No, it's missing the point completely. I think that Panamasi Yogananda said that the blood is, I can't remember if the blood of the body was the vibration Om of all that is. And I think maybe the blood was the Holy Spirit or the Brahman that exists in us all. Anyway, but taking the most basic interpretation of things and making it canon, it's going to still affect us for a while, but that is indicative of a lower age, of a lower level of consciousness. And the other things in the Abrahamic traditions based on fear. I'm not just talking about Christianity, I'm talking about Islam and Judaism, based on fear and God being wrathful and vengeful and jealous. Our ideas of God at any given time are a reflection of our level of realization. And honestly, the amount of the source of God that we've realized. And they understood God that way because that's all that they could realize. They could only take the most basic rules and then take all the lessons and take them literally, because that's the only way that they thought. And we should never hold that as the lessons from then on out. Slave owners in the South use pieces of the Bible talking about how to treat your slaves, being like, look, the Bible talks about slavery. Obviously, it's okay. Even if we're past slavery, we shouldn't keep on using it that way. We shouldn't hold ourselves relative to a literal interpretation of a document that was conceived of, lessons that were taught to a different people long ago, and that was edited and compiled at conferences at Constantinople that is now not even the same city, nor the same nation, nor even has majority Christians in it at this point. That was a long time ago, and things are going to keep on happening like that. I'm belaboring this point not because I hate Christianity or Abrahamic religions. I dislike them, but I don't hate them. But I'm belaboring this point because we choose to carry that level of consciousness and that level of understanding into future generations. And people are starting to not do that, and have been, starting to not do that for a while. And that's a good thing. You're going to have people holding onto the anchor, hoping that it'll eventually float, but they'll be drowning in the past. As we move forward into future yugas, into this one and in the future yugas, we're going to see a more all-encompassing acceptance that there's different ways back to the source, that there's different ways of understanding things, and it's okay, and that we don't have to go by the exact same rules that people in a different time, a different place, and of a different mindset held true and held to. We can grow beyond this, and we will. And I think of the Supreme as Ma Kali. I think of God as, this might be an example of different ideas in this age. And I'm in this age, hey, here I am. She is compassion. She is only wrath to those who glorify their ego and dominate others and put down others and try to force others into their way of understanding and their way of living. My understanding, for instance, displayed by this, is more all-encompassing, more accepting. I wouldn't necessarily call it more liberal, but you can. But I think that we're going to start seeing more and more ideas, political and spiritual and philosophical, where it's like, hey, just do what you want, just don't hurt yourself or anybody else. And if there's some kind of spiritual significance to hurting yourself, then you can, but there's certain limits. Even if somebody kills themselves, how are you going to make a law against that? Because it's not like you can enforce it. Anyway, regardless, you're going to start seeing things open up. You're going to start seeing people open up. And really, honestly, this isn't even a message to anybody right now. I think this is a message to people in the future. But right now, there is reason to hope. There's reason to see people waking up, to see people saying, oh, look, maybe these pagan god things, maybe paganism isn't as foolish as people 50 years ago thought it was, or the idea of multiple gods. Oh, and multiple gods doesn't necessarily mean that there's multiple gods in us, but that multiple gods are different faces of the source, of Godhead, just like they wrote in Renaissance times. No, not Renaissance times, classical times. Anyway, that's me looking at a book. But you'll look for the hope and you'll find it. Look for Armageddon and you'll find evidence for that. Whatever you look for, you'll find evidence for it. But I will say that we are ascending. It's just slow. It's not the end. It's not everybody waking up either. Let us move forward and let us embrace consciousness at higher levels. Let us not drag an anchor onto land where it no longer serves a purpose of holding us in port in a chaotic storm of the least of ages. We are no longer the least of ages. Now we are on land and finding our legs. At any rate, thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.